So I just did a bunch of takes and realized my microphone wasn't plugged in, so, yeah. What is going on, everyone? In this video, we're going to be putting SLOG2 up against HLG2 to find out what is the best picture profile there is for Sony. Let's go. Alright, so if you do not know what SLOG2 is or HLG2, essentially they are picture profiles for your Sony cameras. Now, not necessarily all Sonys are going to have these picture profiles, but most of them out there that I know of are going to have these picture profiles. Now you may ask, why do I want to use a flat picture profile? Essentially, it's going to give you the most flexibility in post when it comes to color grading and maintaining the most detail in highlights and in your shadows, because it's going to give you more dynamic range. And a dynamic range is essentially how much highlights it can capture without becoming completely white and how much shadows it can capture without becoming completely black. So I purposely, when I did these test shots, tried to do test shots where there was really bright highlights and really dark shadows. So you'll see that I'm shooting into the sun quite a bit. So starting off first, this is the SLOG2. This is HLG2. And this is with no picture profile at all. Alright, so in this test, I think you're going to start to see quite a bit of difference between SLOG2 and HLG2. The biggest thing to note is the colors. Now, both of them are exposed pretty dang well, but you'll notice the colors in HLG2 are a lot punchier, especially in the blues and in the greens. That's what I really noticed. I could get the saturation of certain colors up about the same, but the blues and greens of HLG2 always tended to be more saturated than SLOG2, and they always tend to be more punchy. I also find that the colors with HLG2 are a little bit easier to work with, and you don't have to do as much to get the colors looking as good with HLG2 as you do with SLOG2. So if you're just looking for speed, you don't want to do a bunch of post-processing and having to color grade a ton, I would probably push you more towards HLG2 over SLOG2. But that is that test. Let's move right on into the next one. Alright, so with this shot, you're going to notice one of the biggest advantages and one of the biggest disadvantages with SLOG2. The biggest advantage being, of course, that there's nothing blown out in this video. Now, you're going to notice with HLG2, there's white hot spots on his face that are essentially blown out. It's completely white. All detail is lost in his face right there. Whereas SLOG2, there's none of that. The entire picture is essentially perfectly exposed. Now, the biggest drawback to SLOG2 is your base ISO goes up to 800. So that means you're going to be introducing more noise into your video. If you notice in the bottom left corner where there's shadows, you're going to notice more noise in the SLOG2 video than you will with the HLG2 video. But in this particular test, I do definitely prefer the SLOG2 because I don't want any skin tones being blown out at all. But let's move on to the last test. Alright, so with this last test, the biggest difference you're going to notice is the colors in this test. Now you're going to notice that both of them were able to expose this pretty much dead on and was able to capture a good amount of highlights and a good amount of shadows. But you are going to notice that the green and blues on HLG are a lot punchier. Now if you look at the skin tones are pretty much saturated exactly the same with SLOG and HLG2. But again, the blues and the greens are a lot punchier and a lot more saturated on HLG2. And I find that I like the colors quite a bit more on HLG2. And like I said, I find that they are a lot easier to work with and post, and you don't have to do quite as much to get them looking really good. As for what picture profile I think is better, I would honestly say neither, because you got SLOG2 over on one side, which is really good at capturing a ton of information with super high dynamic range. However, you're not going to be getting as good of colors, I think, personally, and it is a little bit harder to work on in post and just takes a little bit more time. Whereas HLG2, you're not going to be getting as much dynamic range as SLOG2, but I do find that the colors are a little bit better out of camera, and I prefer how the colors look even after working on them a little bit in post, and I find it's a lot easier to work on in post as well. So HLG2 is what I often find myself using more of the time, just because I don't need to capture a ton of dynamic range. But when I do need to capture a ton of dynamic range, I will obviously go over to SLOG2 and use that, no problem. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button right down below. Also, let me know in the comments below, what is the picture profile do you use for your camera, whether it's Canon, Sony, whatever camera you use. Let me know what picture profile you use. But like I said, that's pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you